Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're pulling from a really fascinating stack of sources, M&A advisory notes, legal breakdowns, and even some revealing business psychology research.
Yeah, it's a great mix of materials.
It really is. And our mission today is to essentially build your ultimate survival guide for selling a business.
Mm.
And specifically, we're trying to demystify the very first and honestly, arguably the most dangerous step of deal making.
Without a doubt, the most dangerous step.
Right. So if you're listening to this, I want you to imagine yourself sitting exactly where I am right now. I've got this document in front of me. It's got a very heavy formal title at the top. It says Heads of Terms.
The dreaded heads of terms.
Exactly.
Ugh.
And, as someone playing the role of a UK business owner who is just staring at this for the very first time, I am feeling this wild mix of adrenaline, elation, and just absolute panic.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Because, looking at this price tag on my life's work, it feels like I'm standing at the finish line of a marathon, right?
Mm.
I'm just waiting to break the tape.
Which, honestly, is a completely natural psychological reaction to seeing your company's valuation in black and white for the first time.
It's a huge moment.
It is. But drawing on the advisory notes we're looking at today, thinking you're at the finish line is actually the very first trap.
Wait, really?
Yeah. You aren't breaking the tape at all. You are actually just walking up to the starting line of an entirely different, much more grueling race.
Okay, I really want to dig into that because reading through these legal breakdowns, it seems like there's this huge disconnect between what this document feels like and what it actually is.
A massive disconnect.
All right, because the sources define the heads of terms, or HOTs as they call them, as a document that captures the headline finances and the general parameters of a business purchase, agreed in principle before the heavy-duty legal work begins.
Keywords there being in principle.
Right, but my hand is virtually shaking holding this pen because in my head, signing this means my business is officially sold. Like, we have a price, we have a proposed date. How is this not a done deal?
And the danger lies right there in that exact assumption. Assuming the deal is done is, well, it's one of the most costly mistakes a seller can make.
Just because of the mindset.
Exactly. The business psychology research in our stack focuses heavily on the morning after a seller signs this document. The relief washes over them, and this massive pitfall opens up. It's something deal makers call the foot off the pedal phenomenon.
Oh, I noticed that in the research. It suggests that typically a business's trading performance actually declines in the window between signing the heads of terms and the actual completion of the sale.
Yeah, happens all the time.
And I totally get the human element of that, right? I might think, well, I've sold it, I'm going to be rich, I don't need to work 60-hour weeks anymore, so I just mentally check out.
Exactly.
But if I sign this document today, why does a temporary dip in revenue even matter? The buyer and I already agreed on the purchase price, right? Here on page 1, I'm looking at it.
Well, that brings us to the most critical mechanical reality of the heads of terms. The price written on that first page. It is not legally binding.
It's not.
No, it is entirely subject to contract and subject to due diligence. The buyer's offer is based on a specific set of assumptions about your current ongoing financial health.
So you're saying if I take my foot off the pedal and my numbers drop a bit, the buyer can just tear up the agreed price.
They don't just tear it up, they mathematically adjust it based on your new reality.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, let's look at a scenario from the M&A advisory notes. Imagine the buyer is purchasing your business on the basis that it generates, say, £1 million in revenue per annum.
Okay.
But over the 3 months between signing the heads of terms and the actual completion date, you're distracted by the legal process, you stop pushing your sales team, and your trading dips.
Right, because I'm exhausted.
Exactly. But based on your most recent management accounts, the business is suddenly running at an annualized rate of, say, £750,000.
Okay, so that's a 25% drop. But as a seller, I would argue they know the business is capable of $1 million. It just had a slow quarter because I'm busy answering their lawyers' endless questions.
Right, but the buyer's perspective is entirely different. To them, the risk profile of the asset has just changed drastically. You've effectively reduced the proven value of the business by 25%.
So they dropped the price by 25%.
They will absolutely try to adjust the purchase price down by that same 25%. They often do this by shrinking the deferred consideration, which we'll explore in a moment. But the core lesson from the sources is really clear here. Your payout is not locked in just because a number is typed into the heads of terms.
Man, that is a really harsh reality check.
Yeah.
Because if the price, the single most important number on this piece of paper isn't legally binding, I have to ask what actually is binding in this document.
Good question.
Because I'm looking through the legal breakdowns, and they highlight 4 specific elements that become hard law the moment both sides sign. They call them the binding 4.
Yes. Jurisdiction, confidentiality, costs, and exclusivity.
Right. And I really want to focus on exclusivity because that sounds like an absolute lockdown.
It is a lockdown. Exclusivity means you are legally bound to this specific buyer for a set period of time. You cannot shop their offer around to find a better price.
Okay.
You cannot actively solicit other deals, and if, say, a dream buyer approaches you completely out of the blue, you cannot even entertain the conversation.
Okay, so I'm thinking about this like the property market.
Mhm.
Exclusivity is basically like me taking my house off the market while the buyer gets their mortgage sorted.
That's a great analogy.
Right. I'm legally committing to not show the house to anyone else.
Yeah.
But the advisory notes mention this usually lasts 3 to 5 months. I mean, that feels like a massive risk for a seller if the buyer is just dragging their feet.
It is a huge risk, which is
Right.
why the rule of thumb outlined in the sources is to negotiate an exclusivity period that is about 1 month longer than you genuinely think the deal will take.
Just have a buffer.
Exactly. You need a buffer for legal delays, but you absolutely should not agree to like a 6-month lock-in for a straightforward transaction. It just removes all your leverage.
Yeah, that makes sense. But what happens if I just change my mind? Like, staying with the house analogy. If I take the house off the market, the buyer pays for a surveyor and a solicitor, and then I just decide I don't want to sell anymore. Is there a penalty?
Well,
Because the third binding element on that list is costs, and the legal text mentions a costs underwrite. What is that?
the costs underwrite is a really critical mechanism. If you, the seller, suddenly withdraw from the deal without a valid contractual reason, like maybe you just get cold feet, you are legally obligated to pay the buyers reasonable legal and professional costs incurred up to the date you pulled out.
Wait. I want to challenge that because it sounds incredibly tilted in the buyer's favor.
How so?
Well, I take my business off the market. They bring in expensive city lawyers to poke holes in my company. And if I decide their revised offer is insulting and walk away, I have to pay their legal bills.
Ah, okay. You only pay if you walk away without a valid reason or if you breach the agreed terms. But it's vital to note that this mechanism is supposed to be mutual.
Oh, mutual.
Right. A well-drafted heads of terms will stipulate that if they pull out without discovering a material defect in your business, they must cover your legal costs.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it's designed to test the true commitment of both parties before anyone spends tens of thousands of pounds on legal fees. Honestly, if a buyer flatly refuses a mutual costs underwrite, the advisory notes flag that as a massive warning sign regarding their actual intent to close the deal.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. It's essentially a mutual financial hostage situation, just to keep everyone honest.
That's one way to put it, yeah.
Well, now I want to move to the part of the sources that genuinely surprised me, and that's how the seller actually gets paid.
Right, the money.
Yeah, because I'm reading through this documentation, and the idea of a single giant check seems to be completely dead. Like, that doesn't happen anymore.
It is entirely a relic of the past. The M&A notes are very clear on the historical shift here. You know, in the 80s and 90s, you might have seen a buyer write a single massive check on day one.
The dream.
The dream, right. But after various economic downturns, and frankly, buyers getting burned by sellers who hid fatal flaws and then just ran away with the cash, the entire industry shifted to a model of risk management.
Makes sense.
So today, almost every SME deal involves something called deferred consideration.
Let me synthesize what the sources say about deferred consideration, because I want to make sure I'm really understanding this correctly.
Go for it.
It seems to imply that I agree on a total purchase price, say £5 million, but I only get perhaps $3 million on the day we sign the final contracts.
Right.
And then the remaining $2 million is paid out to me over the next 2, 3, or 4 years. So in essence, they are buying my business, but using the future trading profits of my business to pay off the balance they owe me. Is that really how this works?
In the vast majority of modern acquisitions, yes.
Yeah.
The business essentially pays for itself over time, and you, the seller, remain financially tethered to the ongoing success of the company.
Okay.
It basically ensures you have a vested interest in a smooth handover and that you haven't, left a ticking time bomb in the operations.
But I have to push back on the vulnerability that creates for the seller. I mean, what if they are just terrible at running my business.
Wow.
What if they come in, alienate all my best clients, the revenue completely tanks, and then when my deferred payment is due next year, they just turn around and say, sorry, the company didn't make enough profit to pay you. I've already handed over the keys. How does a seller protect their payday?
It is the ultimate nightmare scenario for a seller, which is exactly why the heads of terms stage is where you must foreshadow your protections.
Foreshadow. So we don't write it all out yet.
Right, you don't write the full granular legal clauses yet, but you establish the principles that will go into the final share purchase agreement. And the primary protection you need to establish is the concept of trigger events.
Ah, the sources mention those. Like if the buyer defaults on a payment, it triggers a consequence.
A very severe consequence, yes. Yeah. You want it established in the heads of terms that if the buyer misses a scheduled deferred payment, or if there's an insolvency event like bailiffs literally showing up at the company offices, it triggers the immediate acceleration of the debt.
Meaning?
Meaning the entire remaining balance of the deferred consideration becomes due and payable in full immediately.
Wow. Okay, that is a very strong deterrent.
Yeah.
But there's another mechanism in these legal breakdowns called the right of offset. And honestly, this one genuinely worries me.
Yeah, the right of offset is tricky.
It sounds like if the buyer discovers an undisclosed liability after the sale, they can just dock my deferred payments. But who acts as the referee there? Like, can a buyer just invent unexpected costs or exaggerate a minor issue just to slash my payout?
That is a brilliant question and a very real risk. The right of offset exists because if a buyer discovers a massive unpaid tax bill 6 months after the sale, it is incredibly expensive and time-consuming for them to have to sue you to get that money back.
Right.
So offset allows them to simply deduct that tax bill from your next scheduled payment. However, to your point about abuse, you cannot just accept a blanket of offset.
Exactly. Because they can just say, oh, the office chairs were squeaky. We had to replace them all. We're deducting 10 grand.
Exactly why your lawyers will eventually draft dispute resolution mechanics into that clause. So the heads of terms should acknowledge the right of offset, but with the caveat that any offset must be for a verified breach of warranty.
Okay, verified.
And, crucially, if there is a dispute over the validity of the buyer's claim, the disputed amount goes into an independent escrow account until a third-party arbitrator resolves it. You never, ever want the buyer to act as the sole judge, jury, and executioner of your deferred payments.
I love that. The escrow account completely neutralizes the incentive for the buyer to just make up fake claims to save cash.
Exactly.
Now, this level of strategy brings me to a really critical point about timing. Because I'm reading all these warnings in the advisory notes about drawing red lines in the sand.
Yes, red lines are vital.
But my instinct, as a first-time seller who just wants to keep the momentum going, is to smile, sign this non-binding document today, and then fight about the difficult stuff like personal guarantees or that right of offset we just talked about. Fight about that 3 months from now when the lawyers are arguing anyway.
Please don't do that. The psychology research in our sources warns heavily against that exact instinct. Deferring conflict is basically a fatal error in M&A. If you have non-negotiable conditions, what we call red lines in the sand, they must be raised right now before the heads of terms are signed.
But why the rush? If the document isn't legally binding, like why start a fight today?
Because while the terms themselves might not be legally binding, the heads of terms sets the absolute commercial parameters and, frankly, the psychological tone for the entire transaction.
Oh, I see.
Think about it. If you wait until you are 3 months deep into the legal process, both sides have spent £50,000 on lawyers, the buyer has secured their financing based on specific assumptions, and then you suddenly announce you refuse to sign a personal guarantee, you will blow up the deal.
Because they'll feel like I hid that condition from them.
Exactly. The sunk cost fallacy is real, but so is the perception of bad faith. The buyer will feel you deliberately concealed a deal breaker just to string them along. And honestly, they will often walk away purely on principle.
Okay, I understand the necessity, but how do I actually execute that pushback today without sounding, hostile? I really don't want to start a multi-million-pound relationship by being unnecessarily combative on day one over a personal guarantee.
The advisory notes offer a highly effective tactical approach for exactly this, known as depersonalization.
Depersonalization.
Yeah. When you need to push back on a dangerous request in the draft heads of terms, you remove yourself as the source of the friction. You blame a third party.
Oh, The sources mention blaming your family or your lawyer, right?
Yeah.
Like, my lawyer absolutely won't allow a personal guarantee.
Exactly.
But do sophisticated corporate buyers actually fall for that? It sounds
Yeah.
a bit like an excuse.
The beauty is they
Hmm.
don't have to fall for it. They just have to accept it as a stated commercial reality. You just say, listen, I understand why you're asking for a personal guarantee, but my legal counsel has drawn a hard line on this based on my family's estate planning. We simply cannot offer personal guarantees.
Oh, that sounds very official.
Right. And then you enshrine that refusal directly into the heads of terms. You
Wrong.
literally type in a sentence saying, it is agreed that the outgoing directors will not provide personal guarantees.
Man, I see the power in that.
Yeah.
Because then, 3 months later, when their aggressive legal team sends over a 100-page contract that suddenly includes a personal guarantee buried on page 80, I don't have to have an emotional argument. I just point back to the document we both signed on day one and say, hey, we already settled this.
You are just holding them to the commercial parameters they already accepted. And, this entire dynamic underscores exactly why a seller must have an experienced M&A lawyer review the heads of terms before a single signature goes on the page.
Even though it's mostly non-binding.
Especially because of that, a good lawyer will spot the red lines you didn't even know existed. They'll notice if the proposed handover period is completely unworkable or if the exclusivity period is actually a trap.
Okay, so let's follow this timeline forward. I get my lawyer to review it. We push back on the red lines. We establish the trigger events for the deferred consideration. I take a deep breath, and I sign the heads of terms.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Chris.
The adrenaline is pumping, but what actually happens the very next morning?
Well, the relief you feel the next morning will be incredibly short-lived, unfortunately, because the very next thing you receive is the buyer's information request.
Right, the sources mention this transitioning into the due diligence phase, but an information request sounds pretty harmless, like a polite email asking for a few tax returns.
Oh, it is not a polite email. It is an absolute avalanche. The information request is typically a forensic, highly detailed spreadsheet containing hundreds of questions covering literally every single molecule of your business.
You're kidding.
Not at all. They will demand 7 years of tax history,
7 years.
every single employee contract, all your client agreements, records of any legal disputes, proof of intellectual property ownership, health and safety records, environmental compliance. I mean, the list is staggering.
Where does all that information even go? I can't just attach 1,000 PDFs to an email.
No, your legal team will establish a data room. This is a highly secure, heavily indexed digital vault where you, as the seller, have to upload and categorize every single requested document.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the data room becomes the absolute epicenter of the deal for the next several months.
I really want to dig into the mechanics of this due diligence process, because what are they actually looking for in that data room? Before they even drafted the heads of terms, they already looked at my balance sheet and my profit margins. They know what they are buying, don't they?
They know the high-level financials, sure, but the data room is where they verify the structural integrity of those financials. They aren't just looking at revenue, they are looking for hidden risks.
Like what?
For example, they will read your top 5 client contracts to see if there is a change of control clause.
Meaning, if I sell the business, the client has the legal right to just cancel their contract immediately.
Precisely. And if they find that clause, the buyer suddenly realizes that your guaranteed revenue isn't guaranteed at all.
Ouch.
Right. Or they'll check if your star sales director actually has a non-compete clause in their employment contract, or if they can just quit the day after the sale and steal all your clients. The due diligence phase is where the buyer checks if the business under the hood actually matches the shiny exterior you sold them.
Looking at the sheer volume of work required here, I mean, running a business during the day while uploading a decade of tax documents by night, it's pretty easy to see how mistakes happen.
Oh, burnout is a huge factor.
Synthesizing all these sources, what would you say are the most common unforced errors sellers make in this specific transition between signing the heads of terms and opening the data room?
Honestly, the mistakes almost all stem from underestimating the gravity of the document. Number 1 is definitely the ego stroke of the big number. Sellers are often so blinded by the headline purchase price that they sign the heads of terms way too quickly without reading the mechanics of how that money is actually delivered.
Right, so they see £5 million and completely ignore the fact that $3 million of it is tied to impossible future performance targets.
Exactly, you see it all the time. Number 2 is what we discussed regarding red lines, wanting to be the nice guy on day 1, and failing to flag deal breakers until it's far too late.
Makes sense.
And number three is agreeing to an exclusivity period that simply doesn't match the reality of the data room. Oh, I can see that.
Yeah, if you agree to a 4-week exclusivity period, but it takes you 6 weeks just to locate and upload all your employee contracts, you've created massive panic. The exclusivity expires, the buyer gets nervous, and you are certainly forced to make rushed, bad decisions just to keep them at the table.
And I imagine failing to fully understand that right of offset we talk about is a major one too. Like you sign a document agreeing they can dock your pay for hidden liabilities, and then you open a data room that is just an absolute mess of unsigned contracts and pending lawsuits.
Yeah.
You are basically just handing them the scissors to cut your deferred consideration to pieces.
Here you are, you're handing them the scissors. And this circles all the way back to the psychological element we discussed at the very beginning, the emotional weight of the heads of terms.
Right.
It is incredibly tempting to let out a massive sigh of relief,
Yeah.
pop the champagne, and think the heavy lifting is over. But understanding the data room, the rigorous due diligence, the trigger events, the costs underwrites, it really forces you to realize that this document is quite literally just the starting gun. So how does a seller stay grounded through all of this? Because honestly, reading this stack of sources, the journey sounds terrifying.
It's daunting, but you stay grounded by accepting that the heads of terms sets the absolute architectural foundation for the entire deal. My advice, drawn from the consensus of all these M&A advisors and legal experts, is simply this. Read every single line.
Yeah.
Understand exactly what you are agreeing to, distinguishing clearly between the binding lock-ins and the non-binding statements of intent. Do not let the intoxicating excitement of a potential payday blind you to the cold, hard mechanics of how that payday is structured and protected.
That's good advice.
And above all else, have the courage to raise your concerns and draw your red lines before you sign, rather than just hoping the problems will magically disappear in the data room.
That is a phenomenal synthesis of these sources, and it completely changes the way I'm looking at this stack of paper on my desk. It isn't a finish line at all. It's the rule book for the race we are about to run. Well, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over as we wrap up this deep dive. We have spent this time exploring how the vast majority of a heads of terms document is not legally binding. We've also talked about human nature and how tempting it is to just kick the can down the road on difficult confrontational conversations. But I want you to ask yourself this. If you enter into a heads of terms agreement, secretly relying on the fact that it isn't legally binding, just to get you out of uncomfortable negotiations today,
Yeah.
are you already setting your deal up to fail before the data room even opens? Think about that. We will catch you on the next deep dive.